Businesses thrive by knowing customer insights because today's insights are tomorrow's facts. At iResearch, we live and breathe insights. And despite searching high and low, we were unable to find a customer insights podcast that answers one of the most important questions in business. Why do customers do what they do? So we launched one. Hi, I'm your host, Darshan Mehta. Today, I'm going to be speaking with Alan Versteeg. He is an engineer turned sales management expert with over 2 decades of experience in the sales industry. He is the Global Chief Revenue Officer at Growth Matters. Prior to this current position, he served as the Sales Management Authority. Previously, Alan was the founder of Hired Results. He has served in various roles, and I'm looking forward to talking to him. Thank you and welcome, Alan.
Thanks for having me, Darshan. Good to be here.
Tell me, you've had quite an interesting path, and you started out as an engineer and then turned into sales. But I'm curious, what are the aha moments that led you into engineering? And then what are the aha moments that led you into sales?
Yeah, I think the engineering was less aha and more daha. So coming from Dutch heritage is what we do. We become engineers. My dad was an engineer. Unfortunately, I lost him when I was 12. But I did grow up watching Airwolf, Knight Rider, and MacGyver. So I thought, well, let me get into electronic engineering because I thought that's what I'd be doing, and did that for quite some time. The aha moment was really the shift into sales. I read a book called You're Born an Original, Don't Die a Copy by John Mason. And he says in the book, if you passionately hate what you're doing for more than 2 weeks, stop. And I was like, well, I've got some sunk costs. I've been doing this for 2 years, but I'm not enjoying it. So let me try something else. And then bumped into a friend who was in sales, and he said, why don't you give sales a go? And a lot of aha moments from that moment, but that was effectively how the pivot took place from engineering into sales.
So what were some of the original aha moments you've had in sales after you transitioned from engineering?
Well, I'm asking your audience not to drop off now, but I got fired from my first 4 sales jobs. But I did everything they told me to do, right? So I'm really good at consuming content and remembering content. So I get 100% from my product knowledge tests. And I was the world's best talking brochure. Then they say things like, Alan, you're not motivated enough. And then I'd get so motivated, that I became the world's most excited best talking brochure. But no matter what advice I followed, I couldn't seem to break into the success in selling. And I was frustrated. Now, you must remember, as the son of an engineer, I've got 3 sisters and my mom. They're all saying, come on, Al, you got to get back into engineering. This isn't working for you. And I think they were more proud to call me an engineer than a salesperson. But in that struggling, something sat inside me. And as an engineer, we believe in cause and effect. There's got to be a mechanic. There's got to be a way that this can work. And it was under a manager by the name of Glenn Crick. And he called me aside one day and he said, Alan, I can see you struggling. I said, yes. He says, I want to ask you a question. Is sales a career or a job? So I said, no, it's a career. I'm doubling down on this. He goes, how hard did you study for this career? And kind of a penny started to drop. And I said, well, I studied pretty hard. He says, well, you don't understand something. Sales is a profession and professions practice. Doctors practice, lawyers practice, sales professionals practice. You don't get to study once and have a lifetime of glory. It's a profession that you practice every day. And if you make a shift to a career, you'll see everything in what you're doing change. And in that moment, in that aha moment, it was like, okay, now I get it. And then became a student of the sales profession.
And so tell me, what was the aha moments that you've had since then? You said you've had quite a few then.
Yeah, so interestingly enough, I went into sales, got really good at it, which was, a product of me making it a profession, applying my engineering thinking to it. So finding the frameworks and the systems that worked. And eventually I thought, well, I'm sure there's other Allens out there, other Allens that are struggling in sales, not because they don't have the desire, but because something hasn't unlocked in them. So I thought it'd be good for me to move into a sales training space. And I got to represent a large international IP product here in Africa. And everyone loved the training. Everyone nodded and smiled. Everyone said it was great, but there wasn't a shift in performance. And the frustration is, I think, if you're driven by impact, if you're driven by a desire to, I was trying to find those Allens and really crack through, you get frustrated when that takes place. You're like, but come on, surely this is working for you. You can perform. And my moment then became and said, what changed in my life? And the change was that I worked under a great sales manager. So I started to investigate that. And what we came to realize was that without an investment into sales managers, no amount of training, no amount of consulting, and no amount of enablement has any sustainable impact on sales performance. At the end of the day, we're as strong as the sales managers that lead us. And the aha moments that came from that is that we were more effective as frontline sales managers in the 80s than what we have become with all the tools, technologies, and intelligence around us. We've forgotten that real art and science of frontline sales management. And yeah, we created a company just over 10 years ago called Growth Matters. Did some good work in South Africa, got visibility of some global customers. And yeah, that's how we got into the space, dedicated to developing sales managers so that they can develop people.
So what are the top three characteristics a sales manager needs to be a really good, effective sales manager?
Well, the first thing you have to understand where your impact comes from. And the challenge, Darshan, it speaks to sales as well, and understanding those customer insights. But the first thing is to realize your job isn't merely to get the number, right? Obviously, you get fired for not getting the number and you get promoted for getting the number. But your job is to drive customer value by executing the strategy through your people so that you can get the number. So the first attribute is sales leaders that are very focused on customer value seem to be better in control of their teams. And then the second attribute, critically important, is you have to have a passion for unlocking potential in others. And I say that because it's a fundamental ego shift from becoming an individual contributor to creating individual contributors. And in most cases, it's a decrease in salary, it's an increase in pressure and stress. So you have to have that desire and that passion where you're going, I want to unlock the potential of other salespeople. I want to change their family trees by changing what they earn. I want to create some generational value for them. And if you don't have that mindset, you don't move forward. And then I think the final one is the ability to remain steadfast in the chaos, because everybody's throwing stuff at you. Everybody's asking you to do more, get more done, hit the number. Everyone has an opinion. Everybody's an expert. So you got to buffer that noise. And you can't manage chaos with chaos. You can only manage it with systems. So I say those three things: understanding a broader role that is customer-led, understanding that you want to develop, we have a passion for developing others, and then making sure that through that, you can drive that outcome you're looking for.
People say customer value, but I'm curious, what exactly does that mean? And how do you tell someone who's coming to sales, they have a lot of the other characteristics, but they don't quite understand value? So how do you convey that to them? How do you get them to really understand what you're talking about?
Well, Darshan, I love that you say that, because most people say those words and they don't know what they mean. And the best way I can explain it is relevance is the currency of value. So we have to identify what's relevant to people. If you and I get on a call and we speak for 10 minutes about fly fishing and you have no interest, it doesn't matter how much of an expert I am, there's no interest, there's no value being exchanged. So the first thing, we have to understand what value means to the person we're serving. And then based on that, we have to be continuously focusing on closing the gap between what customers expect and what they experience. And that's the value gap. That's the value gap in life. Valentine's Day comes around, and guess what? There's an expectation and there's an experience. The thing in the middle is the value gap. So the better we can understand what value means to the audiences we serve, and then how to engineer systems to close that gap, the more we can drive customer value. In most companies, Darshan, as you know, we speak about it and we go, we value centered or we customer centric. And I say, well, show me the evidence. And it's hard to find the evidence in a company that that's the true way they operate. It's their intent, but it's not their operating norm.
Would you say that one of the best ways to achieve that is the Socratic method of selling?
Define what you mean by that, Darshan.
Asking questions, basically, ask a series of questions and keep, you kind of know the destination, but you're just asking questions. You're not necessarily selling or telling people what, but more than anything, you're just asking questions to get deeper and deeper into what ultimately you start peeling off those layers and getting to the value, what the customer really wants.
So at a direct answer, the answer is yes, but because you clarified it, you know where you're taking them. In sales, you have to be the GPS, not the driver. And if you're not leading to insights, you're not adding value. So we can't base it on questions and things we ask, and we don't know where we're going because the customer doesn't know that. I love the fact that a lot of what you talk about is insights, and insights are the mechanism that then become, the value that they need, the information that they need. But customers are drowning in information and starved of insights. And what we don't realize is unless we focus on that, unless we go, wait a minute, but what does it actually look like? And we know where we're taking them, then the questions don't matter.
Yeah. And so then the next thing in terms of really wanting to drive others to do well. What's the best way to get people in that position to become effective managers, to really want to have their salespeople become more effective? Obviously, not just the numbers. There's something more than that. What is that?
Well, I mean, you've hit the nail on it. It's exactly the same framework. So we teach something called the ICE model: identify the gap, clarify the root cause, and explore the actions. And the challenge, Darshan, is you speak to any sales leader or organizational leader, and they'll talk about how critically important coaching is. Yet it's the first meeting cancelled. It's the last metric measured. We don't pay the attention to it we need to. If you want to unlock potential in others, you have to use question-based coaching. You have to, as you said, you know where you're going, but instead of leading with and saying, well, you should just, and we end up shooting all over people, right? You should do this and you should do that and you should do this. You're really wanting to guide them and say, well, let me help them identify what the gap is. Let me help them clarify what they think the root cause is. And let's explore actions, because we are 7 times more likely to action ideas we've come up with. And that's the sign of a good salesperson with customers. You protect them from their ignorance by guiding them and shepherding them to the right point. And it's the same thing with a sales manager. If you understand the behavior change you're trying to create, you can't just logic bomb them. It's not how behavior changes. You have to use that question-based approach. And it's, that's what neuroscience says works as well. So rapidly shift thinking and behavior.
So I'm curious, which of the two would make the most effective salespeople? Those who actually really love making money, or those who seek to solve a problem?
My view, and it's supported by the evidence. So there's a wonderful book called Selling with Noble Purpose. The author's name, Lisa McLeod, should be a great guest to have on your podcast. But effectively, she did the research across the world, and the top performing salespeople globally sell with noble purpose. They believe with kind of this mantra: selling won't help, but helping will sell. And pretty much, a honeybee goes to collect pollen, doesn't know it's keeping the planet alive. That's a matter of fact thing. Salespeople that sell with noble purpose, the money comes their way regardless. And these don't have to be mutually exclusive things. You can earn a great living and drive great impact. In actual fact, they're far more closely tied than we realize. The evidence suggests that it's good to pursue money, but the problem I see is many sales managers treat their salespeople like coin-operated machines. If we add a bigger incentive or add a greater commission or greater whatever, we'll get the outcome. And the reality is, when you build a culture of noble purpose, of really seeking to help, sharing the insights, being the Sherpa that guides them up the mountain, well, then the numbers generally start to take care of themselves and exponentially improve, because you can protect, partner, and grow those key customers you bring on board.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is true for business as well, not just sales. And that is that you're often going to make more money if you're actually solving a problem versus just chasing the money. So I'm curious, how do you train new salespeople to learn? First of all, how do you define insights, and how do you get them to identify them and actually know what an insight is when they see one?
But Ashans, I think that's a question that's plaguing a lot of organizations right now. And I'll give you my view on it. I think it's the fact that they're doing this after the fact. While I love the nature of your podcast, insights are actually where you start everything. And I'll give you an example. We go to companies that say, Al, we got a challenge with our sales team. Can we do a competency assessment and build them and teach them competencies? And I'm saying, but you can't teach people competencies, because competencies are an outcome. And they look at me and they go, what do you mean? When we build a competency-based academy, I said, that's not your problem. Your problem is you can't demonstrate competency unless you are confident. Oh, yeah, but we can't teach people confidence. Well, you can't teach them confidence, but you can teach them conviction. And they go, what do you mean teach them conviction? That's an emotion. I'm saying you do that by giving them clarity of your value proposition and insights that they buy into. And that's the stack. Because entrepreneurs sell well without sales training. Pretty simply, Darshan, because of these things. I have clarity of the value that I'm taking to the market. As a result, I have conviction inside of me that it would be negligent for me to deny that value. On the top of that, I have confidence, and then I go out and sell. And as I go out and sell, I learn, I get through feedback how to improve that competency. But most companies are trying to do it at the layer and say, well, if I can teach you how to negotiate, and if I can teach you customer value, and if I can teach you these things, I'm going, well, that comes when you sell with noble purpose. That comes when you have clarity and conviction of your value proposition. And those insights then come forward. And the challenge is, I think, organizations are trying to codify competence and not going, wait a minute, what are the insights we bring to the market? How are we the Sherpa in our industry? And let's engineer that first and then coach the competence. Because you can't teach it. You can't teach competence. You can only get competent by doing, and you get competent quicker with coaching. But, It's sometimes a soapbox that doesn't get heard. Companies still invest crazy amounts into competency-based training, and it's not the difference. It's insights that create that clarity and conviction.
Yeah. I think insights are definitely key to many things, right? And that actually get to an insight really requires a lot of listening and understanding. And actually, as you said earlier, getting to the value proposition that's really underlying and driving things, right?
Yeah, Darshan, also the intent. I mean, you said it earlier, it's that intent, right? We have to be curious to listen for those insights. We have to be asking the right questions. They don't just occur. They don't just things we drop. They're not just punchlines or elevator pitches. They're a collaboration between you and I. And I mean, you already know this because of the name of your podcast, but there's an actual chemical release when we have an aha moment. There's an actual shift in our biochemistry when we have an aha moment. And that creates a connection between the people we're selling to and what we're trying to sell. And we put not enough emphasis on that. But when the intention's right, we get good at it. So I think once again, companies are teaching the mechanics of it, which are nuanced once you have the right intent. Of course, you can do it better, but you can only do it better if you're curious and you want to, with noble intent, create that value.
Right. Absolutely. And I think what you're talking about is you actually evoke an emotion at the end, right? And that's that connection you get, is that emotional connection somehow you're able to establish with your customer.
Well, it's so true. I mean, there's some research from Philip Squire. He wrote a book called Selling or Sales Transformed. But simply put, he said when they ask buyers why they don't buy, and they say 9 times out of 10 they don't buy, they always mentioned value traits. They didn't mention competencies. They said they were too supplier centric. They were overly confident. They were actually arrogant to a degree. They were didn't listen to my needs. I mean, these are value traits, right? Because if I'm truly customer centric, I'm going to show up in a different way. If that's my value system, when I enter a sales call and I'm going in my head, it would be negligent for me to deny them the value I can bring. I show up in a completely different way. And that's why I love what you're sharing. It's we don't focus on that. We don't go, wait a minute, let's get to that emotional intelligence part, that underpinning desire. And then the other things show up in the right way.
So how has the sales field changed since COVID?
It's interesting because it depends on how you look at it. What we've definitely lost for some salespeople, or specifically those that work on major accounts where you're a key account manager, you're walking the floor, right? So you get to pick up a lot of opportunities because of who you're engaging with. And during COVID, that was very different. But my frustration, once again, is we need to remember that selling virtually is just a new medium. At the end of the day, I still need to have the right method and the right methodology. So I've got to have the idea that I'm trying to create value. And how I do that virtually changes. Practically speaking, Darshan, I mean, I have the luxury now of signing big global companies without having to go into territory. Pre-COVID, I'd have to, when I'm training one of my global customers in Singapore, I have to go make a whole bunch of sales calls in Singapore to try and win some business. Now it's okay for me to hop on a virtual call and sign a global deal. So the things that have changed are nuanced, but when we rock up as salespeople and we don't show up, that's going to just be elevated in virtual environments where I can just see you don't have your house in order. In-persons, we can stumble around a bit more, but in these environments, you've got to be on point. Right? You got to really be on point. So I would argue that what's changed is the top performers are performing better, and those that rock up and don't show up, they're just struggling in a new way and making virtual selling the excuse.
I think that's definitely opened up a huge opportunity to be able to connect with people via these Zoom calls and so on virtually. So I'm curious, are there certain traits or characteristics good salespeople have to be better at when you're doing it virtually versus in person?
Number one thing is you have to know your inside story, and you have to know how to put that story together, right? So I mean, for every virtual pitch, I build out a hero's journey. I understand the different areas, and then effectively, the beauty with virtual is I don't have to follow the sequence of my PowerPoint. While I'm talking to the customer, I can change something in the back end, move this part of the story, yeah. But the level of preparation, because generally speaking, in a live call, you shouldn't be presenting early on, right? You should be understanding the questions, knowing where they're at. In a virtual environment, it normally happens that about half an hour in of the right questions, people want to see something. So remember, their brains are wired for Netflix. So by the time you're 30 minutes in, they're getting bored. So we have to shift to that edutainment layer. And virtual gives you a wonderful way to do that. You don't have to have 97,000 slides, although I've got probably 42 slides in my story that I can put in at different times. But it's that skill. It's knowing where the aha sits, knowing when to bring the insight forward, knowing when we bring that audience. And so I'd say the storytelling with noble intent is a key differentiator virtually. And here's the win. The win is if you do it pretty well, you're not just the tallest dwarf in the village. I mean, you are a giant amongst mediocrity because people are trying to not leverage this medium. And I think it's a powerful medium if you use it right. Case in point, we were on a call yesterday. No, when was it? Thursday. And you got 9 senior people in 7 different territories. I mean, how do you pull that together before? You don't. And now I can influence. I can scale my influence in that space. But it comes back to that Socratic view. End of the day, if I show interest and I show up, I don't rock up, and I treat this as a profession. This isn't overly complicated. My frustration, Darshan, just to go on an insight. Someone told me the other day, the big trend they're seeing is human to human selling. And outside of bringing up my meal, I was like, have you been asleep at the wheel? Because it's always been human to human selling. We're the ones that have tried to put these layers in between. And yes, I understand that buyers are coming in later and they can educate themselves. But especially in the world of generative AI, trust levels are going to come down, and people are going to want to work with people that they actually know are real people on the screen with real insight and real advice. It's another differentiator. I don't see generative AI as a threat in any way. I see it as a differentiator where I'm going, well, now you're really going to need my expertise. You're really going to need my insights and aha moments. And you just make that, that pivot in your head.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of people get caught up in the technology, but at the end of the day, everything boils down to the human connection, right? And the technology is facilitating those connections in a way, but at the end, it still requires that human connection. And I think with the technology available at your, on your desktop now, you can bring in a lot of emotion, video, all these things that are tools that you had. Not that you couldn't do it before, but it is different when you have someone as a captive audience on a screen. So you have to be quite, I think, versatile and flexible to use these tools, but you can really use them to your advantage. And I think you're seeing that, aren't you?
100%. But you've just got to understand the medium. I mean, give you an example. COVID hit. Our job's to get onto planes, fly to countries, put people in rooms and train them. I mean, who's going to do that? You know what I mean? So I was obviously sitting there going, what's going to happen to my business? And I realized that, I've got a couple of meetings coming up this week. Let me be the most relevant call they had. So I made myself professional. But I had to learn how to facilitate online, and we had to rebuild our content from the ground up. You couldn't just do a lift and shift. And many companies just did a lift and shift, and then they wondered why it isn't working. And then they get to, post-COVID, and they go, oh, let's go back to the classroom. And don't get me wrong, Darshan, I love starting a journey with our customers in the classroom because I want that human-to-human connection. I want that coffee conversation. I want that beer in the pub afterwards where I'm hearing what's really going in the company. I want that human stuff. But I don't have to go to the same country 3 times anymore because the rest of the stuff I can do virtually once I've established that rapport. So it's about adapting to the medium. And I think you know this, not getting caught up in the debate. We have this debate about why the mud sticks or doesn't stick to the wall. I'm like, just throw mud at the wall. Just get going at this, and you'll find things that work. So I find salespeople and sales managers are hiding behind technology in a big way. And I'm going, wait a minute. It's a human thing. You want to unlock human potential. You want to unlock human to human engagements and focus on that, and then leverage technology. I mean, I leverage generative AI as an example. I leverage my CRM system. I leverage my virtual platform. And they all got pros and cons, but they're not throw it all out and only do it one way. And that's in any profession where you're dealing with customers, it's knowing it's just human. And, if you study Simon Sinek's work, you study any of this. So, I mean, if you look at the work of Simon Sinek, I mean, it's great insights, but it's not new insights. It's the fact that we're this human-to-human thing. We're trying to make sure we're connecting on that. And I think we're losing sight of that. I mean, a practical and sad example, I had a friend who passed away, and I think she got something crazy. I can't remember. It was over 5,000 comments on her Facebook page. We ran a memorial service on the beach, and 7 people arrived. Oh, did you think you can just proxy your connection with that person by a comment on Facebook? And in sales as well, I sent them an email. Well, I did them this. Well, I'm followed up. And then I love where we create new language. They're ghosting me. The customers are ghosting me. I'm like, well, your brain doesn't like that word. Stop using it. There's something I'm not doing that's making me a priority in the customer's life. What can I do to improve that? It's a very different frame of reference. And those are the aha moments I think, Darshan, we're not creating. We're getting very externally focused. We're trying to find the excuse and not the reason. And when we shift that, we go, wait a minute, but why aren't they reaching out? What have I missed? And that doesn't mean I sell everything to everybody all the time. It's just that I have a responsibility to show up and not just rock up as a professional.
Yeah. So you brought up generative AI a couple of times. And I'm curious, how are you seeing people really use it effectively? And then how are you seeing people really not getting it, not using it well?
There's a Bill Gates quote that I can just never forget. Technology applied to an inefficient system accelerates the inefficiencies. Technologies applied to an efficient system accelerate the efficiencies. So unfortunately, Darshan, it still comes back from the user. It still comes back from where I'm departing from. If you're a lazy salesperson, you're going to be using these tools in the wrong way. If you're just trying to find a quick way or a quick hack or a quick silver bullet and you're not operating from the right point, that computer is just going to respond to your prompts. And I mean, I stress test this stuff. There's a moment generative AI gets stupid if you really put some legs behind it. But the reality, most people don't do that. They're going, oh, how do I create a compelling pitch, cut, paste? Now, when you cut, paste a compelling pitch, you haven't had your own insights. You can't deliver that insight, and you come across as disingenuous, no matter how hard you try. Even though they can't tell that their comment came from AI, they just know it's not yours. It doesn't live within your conviction. So what I do is I leverage it. So I believe when you sell with noble intent, what is the research that can support this? What are the challenges I don't see? What information insights can I get when I'm selling to a global software a customer that sells through vendors and not through direct sales? What are the insights? What can I learn to find my insights and engineer my insights? I can accelerate that with generative AI. But it is a support tool. It is not the salesperson. It is like anything else. It's like whether it's my CRM or my pitch deck or my Zoom meeting, everything else is secondary to me. I am the differentiator, and I leverage that technology user. And that's the shift. I mean, there's no 7 steps to it. It starts with anything with noble intent. You can use electricity with the wrong intent, or you can use it with noble intent. Same thing for technology and sales.
Yeah, I agree. I think the best way to do it is to don't rely on it completely. Just like don't rely on the presentation completely, because at the end of the day, what's your best visual? It's you, right? And your connection with the audience and your ability to talk to them. It's not the PowerPoint or the presentation. It's just there to facilitate and help you achieve your goal, but it's not there to replace you.
Not at all. The way I see it is it's digital scenery. I am the presentation. And digital scenery can make really compelling and engage people and keep them entertained and bring them forward. I mean, we have to understand we're in an entertainment industry. That's what we're competing against. We're fighting for people's attention. But if you're not operating from that authentic space of noble intent, you don't get there. And I mean, Darshan, you know this. You run podcasts, but the minute you're departing from how do I add value to my listeners so they can address this key issue, I realized when I started my podcast wasn't being addressed. Generally, everything else takes care of itself. I'm not saying you don't do a lot of work and editing, and the effort's still there. But the interviews are the easier part because where you depart from is who you are. And if where we depart from is who we are, everything else is exponentially easier.
So I'm curious, what role and how important is someone who has empathy to be an effective salesperson?
It is the most important human trait. And empathy is we have the ability to step into how they experience the challenge. And when you're empathetic, it's natural for you to be curious. It's natural for you to be centric on your customer value. It's natural for you to realize that, even a sales process is a guideline, but everyone's operating in their own terrain, in their own paradigm. And when we have empathy, we have curiosity. And when we have curiosity, then people pick that up and they're going, Al's actually quite interested in me, right? And if you think about it, if people want to connect with you, they show interest in you. And empathy is about going, what are they going through? And I love that you brought it up because it's just like one, if I was giving your audience a tip, this concept of objection handling is a lack of empathy, because if you have empathy, you'll have objection prevention. Hey, listen here, Darshan, I know this is a challenging thing for you. And I've worked with people in the past that at this point, there's some red flags or some concerns that trigger in their brain. They're worried about this and they're worried about that. And we get that. However, how we've helped people overcome that is, why are you waiting for the objection? Why don't you just show empathy and saying, this is not a small decision. You're about to dislodge an incumbent and choose it as your global training partner for sales management. I can't go, or let me just try and avoid the objections. They're going to come. Let me show empathy. It's not an easy decision, and we meet them where they're at. So empathy is such a critical component of connection, and connection is what drives the sale. So I love that question.
Have you found a way to gauge empathy, or is this something you can actually train someone to get better at?
I believe you can train someone to get better at that if you can educate them on noble intent. We always depart from where our mindset leaves. So we always, whatever our meaning is, whatever our stories, whatever internal dialogues, I call about meaning and mindset. Whatever we're saying, if I believe that I'm just here to chase my commission check, I'm going to operate from that space. But when we're departing from the right thing, the way you build empathy is you have good question-based approaches that are leading customers to insights that make them feel that you care about their world. And you can train that, but you can only train it on the top of the right intent. And I think managers don't realize the fact that they've absconded sales management to technology. They're missing the ability to unlock that piece of the salesperson, which is the inner value creator. We just think technology can handle it. Technology helps us with the doing, but it doesn't help us with the meaning and our mindset. And that's what sales managers need to do, work with our meaning and our mindset.
So what's the area of sales or training that you'd like to look at in the future? And what do you think is an area you think is really worth exploring?
I think the key area, and we're going to maintain that sales management is the key differentiator, right? So what we're seeing is the more we throw technology and generative AI comes in, and there's going to be another, thing coming through. We've forgotten that ability to really unlock potential in others. So there's a piece missing there. So we're going to stay in that space. Like I say, every company we speak to says, sales coaching is the differentiator. And I'm going, well, show me where it's happening. And it doesn't. First meeting canceled, last metric measured. But where we do see it moving forward is administrative load on salespeople and sales managers is going to decrease through the right technology use. So I think the key shift is how do we navigate a world of differentiation where that benchmark of entry is now becoming easier for our competitors to get to. So how do we differentiate through who we are, not by what we do?
Well, a lot of times nowadays with technology, people want to, go on their own and go through the path of questions and answers on their own before they actually even talk to a salesperson. So is that something you've got into as well, where you actually train people on how to, let's say, build a sales funnel so that, that it's logical and people actually come better prepared to you? Because a lot of people want to do their own self-discovery and investigation and research.
Yeah, the company that best prepares them for that moment of connection is there. And it's exactly that. How do you get them to self-solve? How do you help them along the way? I mean, we've created generative AI bots that help our managers or coach the managers we teach, where they can go on and ask a series of questions and get some support. But when we get to our coaching conversation, our one-on-one, they're better prepared, we're better prepared. So I do think it sets us up for a better point of connection, because we can't ignore the fact that our customer's not going to go, well, I don't want to use tech. What is happening though is there's starting to become an increased lack of trust of what people are seeing.
Interesting. And so that gets back to being authentic. Have you found a way to really present yourself to be more authentic? Because that's another word that a lot of people use, but actually what are the elements to convey authenticity?
If we really go to the root of it, it sits in Brené's Brown book, Daring Greatly. Authenticity is the ability to have vulnerability, right? So people connect with people who are vulnerable. We see vulnerability as a weakness in ourselves, but a strength in others. And I think the key way you start to create that authenticity is to be comfortable with your vulnerability and sometimes just going, I don't know. But the points you touch on are the hard ones, right? Because we're going back to the key importance of emotional intelligence, which somewhere we seem to have forgotten is, human to human selling, right? But authenticity is not, I like to wear a muscle hugger, so that's what I'm going to wear on my call with a customer. Right, I still want to show up professionally. Authenticity is what is the intention I'm operating from. So when you try and manufacture customer value conversations, they're manufactured because you haven't started with authenticity. My intent is to help you. I believe that selling won't help, but helping will sell. I believe that it's negligent for me to deny you the value. When I operate from that space, I can be far more authentic because my intent is authentic. So it's really about the authenticity of intent that customers can thin slice through very quickly if you're only chasing the commission check.
So I'm curious, if you could have lunch or dinner with anyone in sales or sales training management, who would it be and why?
It'd be another lunch with Mark Weinberg, because Mark Weinberg, speaks the truth very bluntly. I love the fact that he has a voice and he gets on his soapbox. And we probably had lunch 7 or 8 times. But if I'm having lunch with someone, it's normally with him at the Porsche Center in Atlanta. So I can get to drive the Porsche and I can get to expel his wisdom. So that's who I would choose. Anyone in sales, definitely a key voice, number one seller on Amazon in our space. But just a good guy, and just he knows the practical truths.
Yeah, well, that's nice. I want to thank you for joining me on the podcast. I really enjoyed talking to you and learning about the traits one needs to be an effective sales person as well as sales manager. And I appreciate the insights.
Darshan, great to connect with you, and thanks for having me as a guest. Appreciate it.
Thanks again.
Getting to AHA was brought to you by iResearch. To find out more about us, head to iResearch.com and make sure to search for Getting to AHA in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else podcasts are found. And don't forget to click follow to ensure you don't miss any future episodes. Thank you for listening.